In the hunting space, I see hunters spend hundreds of dollars on base layers, their rain gear, their mid layer, their coat. Then they go into a $400 pack, long range glass. They'll build a $10,000 long range rifle, even though they've never shot over 100 yards, and the highest end boots, like all the things, optics, Swaro binos and all the shit, spotting scopes. And then they'll buy a $39 knife. And I'm like, the only two things you really need to go hunt is a gun and a knife. You shoot something and you break it down. And I'm like, it should be a part of your gear. You spend just as much time thinking about like, hey, I need a quality blade. Same thing if you're deployed, like, are you gonna have to go hand to hand and kill someone with a knife? Probably not. But again, if we're planning always worst case scenarios, you should be thinking about maybe you end up, separated from your unit for a while and you do have to use some of your sear skills. Do you have a knife blade that's capable of doing that?
You're listening to The Hot Wash by Born Primitive Tactical. I'm Bruno Fallon. I've spent my 4-decade career in some of the most elite units in the United States Special Operations community, where I learned that elite operators aren't made overnight. They're forged through hardship, discipline, and relentless drive. In each episode, I sit down with the most accomplished and innovative leaders in special operations, industry, coaching, and athletes of all disciplines. Let's jump right in. Hey folks, this is Bruno at Born Primitive Tactical in The Hot Wash. I've got a very special guest here today. I've got the founder, owner of Montana Knife Company, Josh. It is a pleasure to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and this is going to be fun, folks. Everybody in the hunting industry knows Montana Knife. It is the industry standard. It's out there. And we got Josh on here because they're stepping into the tactical world, and I think they're going to make some noise quick. If you're a knife guy, you know Montana Knife. I mean, it's out there. I'm going to have Josh tell the story, but I don't think they can make them as fast as the demand signal is. And I think in the business world, that's kind of a cool thing. But what we're here to talk about is, first of all, the company, how it got brought into where it's at, and then where it's going. So, Josh, if you would, I'm not going to butcher your story.
Yeah.
Can you just kind of walk me through how you envisioned it, started it, and your history a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, those kind words for sure. We're very fortunate kind of how things have been going, but we, I mean, it kind of steps way back, honestly. I was a knife maker long before people, before Montana Knife Company was ever really an idea, but I started making knives when I was 11 years old. My Little League baseball coach would bring hunting knives to practice and show the parents, and I don't know why he invited me up to his shop. I don't know. I think I was a pretty responsible little kid, and I asked. Of course, I thought knives were cool. I'm an 11-year-old boy, and asking him questions all the time about them. And so my parents bought me one of his knives for Christmas, and then he invited me up to make one in his shop. And
at 11 years old.
Yeah,
that is awesome.
Yeah, and I made a couple in his shop. Rick Dunkerley's the guy that taught me, and I think it was kind of his way of getting rid of me, but basically after a couple knives, he was like, hey, if you want to be a knife maker, you got to have your own shop. And so I had a lawn mowing business, and I also worked in my parents' construction excavation company. And so I bought a couple $100 belt grinder, and I put it in my dad's shop, and started making knives before and after school, and honestly got really serious with it all the way through, junior high and high school, and started going to shows when I was 14 years old. And back then it was, I'm older than the internet, as I guess you are too.
Yes, sir.
So there was no YouTube. I mean, you had to go to people's shops to learn how to do something. And so I was that kid asking all the gray-haired guys how they were doing stuff. And it was a very sharing community. The knife community is amazing. And I kind of set a goal to become the youngest master bladesmith in the world. And so at 15 years old, I tested for and became the youngest journeyman knife maker in the world. And then at 19, the youngest master bladesmith.
Explain that to me real quick. I'm not even familiar with that. So as a master bladesmith, what does that mean?
Yeah, and that plays a little bit into what we're doing today when people are like kind of the why behind the brand. It's you have to make... You have to be an apprentice for a couple years, and then you have to make a knife, a performance blade, right? Because you can make the prettiest knife in the world, but it's a tool first and foremost, right? So you have to make a blade that has to chop a 1-inch rope in half in one chop. That just shows sharpness. And then that same blade, without sharpening, you have to chop 2 2x4s in half, as many chops as you want, without resharpening. And at the end, it still has to shave hair off of your arm. And then you have to bend that blade 90 degrees in a vise without breaking it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's okay.
Yeah. So what that shows is that you have control over the metallurgy, the heat treat of your blade. It can't be too hard. It can't be too soft. And I don't care if you're a hunter. I don't care if you're an Army Ranger, what you are. That blade, you need to have a blade that is a combination of wear resistance and toughness. Because you can have a blade that'll hold an edge forever, but it's a brittle ass piece of glass, right? Or I can make something really, really tough that you're never going to break, but it won't hold an edge for shit. And so I did that performance test when I was 14, and then I just turned 15, and you have to present 5 knives to a panel of mastersmith judges at the Atlanta Blade Show, and they judge fit and finish. And that's more based on like, how well did you construct a knife? Does it have big gaps in it? And is it crooked and a bunch of that stuff? So I passed that as a journeyman when I was 15. And then I did the master bladesmith test at 19. And it's really the same test, but it's with a Damascus steel blade. So you have to forge a 300 layer Damascus blade that still has to be able to chop and bend and do all that. And then the 5 knives you present to that mastersmith panel, they're much more critical on you. Right? That's like the highest level. If you have anything wrong, they're going to flunk you. And at that time I passed, there was like 85 in the world. Now there's probably 140 in the world.
So what did they say to you at 19 years old when you stood in front of them? They were like, I mean, you had to be like one of none, right? So
yeah, no, I mean, they were good to me, but also like the whole time growing up making knives, those guys were also brutal on me. I mean, I was just the kid, and I was around a bunch of gruff knife makers, and Rick that taught me, he was in the Air Force, and they were just tough dudes. But so they never really ever complimented me. I remember going and like crying to my parents, being like, I'm never gonna ever make them happy or whatever. But like I would show them knives, and they would be like, this is wrong. This doesn't look good. Why'd you do this? And so it was just that constant criticism. And I think I was probably about 20 or 21 years old before I handed a blade. I remember I handed one to Tim Hancock, who was a legend knife maker that I looked up to. And he looked it over and he's like, God damn, that's good, kid. Like, that's a nice knife. And I was like, I mean, I could retire. Fine,
So just not to interrupt you, but there's a lesson right there. I just, something I'm big on right now is the tough love you got as a kid is probably what got you where you are.
Yeah.
Where in today's society, the participation trophy, you'd probably still be making knives that weren't where they are now, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, and these people, I got really lucky. The guys I was learning from, little did I know they would become some of the best makers in the world later. So they weren't that great at knife makers when I met them. And so while I was trying to catch them, they were getting better. And so, I was probably making better knives than they were at the time I met them when I was 19, but they had leveled up. And so it felt like I was running a race against someone who just kept getting faster. And then finally got to a place where I felt like by my mid-20s, I was kind of at least in that class. But yeah, they just told me like, hey, that's great, good job. I wouldn't have been kind of constantly pushing to get better. And I got a lot of really good advice from them along the way about not getting stuck making the same thing. Because as a kid, when I was like 14 years old, I probably had 150 knife orders for like that knife I was making that at that time. And they were like, dude, you're a kid in school. Don't do all those orders. All you're going to do is make that same thing over and over and over. You're not going to advance your skills. Like, you don't have a house payment. You don't have a reason why, like, continue like pushing yourself into things you don't know and getting better. And I did that, and it was great advice.
So you had a lot of great mentors. I mean,
I did.
People that steered you in the right direction.
Yeah, no, I did. And they were all, I thought they were all old. They were probably in their 30s at that time, but
and now look back. Right?
Yeah, exactly. But they called me Psycho Knife Boy, and I'm sure I was a pain in their ass. But they would take me, they would load me up in the car and take me to a show in Eugene, Oregon, or I would room with them at the Atlanta Blade Show. And my parents were really good about just like, no cell phones, I had to use a payphone to call home or whatever, but they would just be like, yeah, you want to go to the Atlanta Blade Show as long as the woodshed's full before you leave. I remember my dad, he told me the woodshed had to be full before I went to the Oregon show one time, and I had all my knives ready, and it was the night before, and he's like, knives are nice, but you're not going. Like, the woodshed's not full. And I chopped wood till like 2 a.m. to get that freaking woodshed full.
Yeah, but I mean, that's, again, I mean, you're the generation, you had to earn it. You had to, and that's why you are who you are today. And, folks, I still think one of the hardest jobs in the world today is parenting.
Yeah.
And then having those outside family mentors, which it sounds like you had a lot of good ones.
Yeah, I did. It was a cool community, and they were looking out for me, and they were hard on me, but they were also really, really good to me. And I tell people, man, if you got some little kid, if you're a welder or you're, let's say you're a shooter and you train shooting, and if you have a little kid asking you a ton of questions, he seems like a good little kid, like, maybe this dad's an accountant and doesn't have a welder or doesn't have a gun or whatever, like, ask that kid to come along, and you don't know how you can change a trajectory of a kid's life. And it's not like I came from a hard environment. My parents were great parents. I had, great life growing up, but had those guys not offered to teach me how to make knives, I'd probably be running a backhoe today, which would be fine. But, I'd have followed my dad's footsteps, but.
Yeah. And that's the other thing that I see a lot in today's society. And I was somewhat this way too, is sometimes you don't want to listen to your parents, and there's that outside influence that comes in that you respect, and they give you some hard love. And if you can run with that, you can be very successful. I mean, that's one of the reasons I actually went in the military at a very young age was hard love. So, another question I have, you've mentioned the Atlanta Blade Show multiple times. Is that like the premier show in the industry? Or?
It is, and it was always the show back then before the internet was. If you wanted to see the best knife makers out there, or buy somebody's knife or whatever, you had to go to that show. And there were other ones as well. I went to New York, I went to Paris, France, Eugene, Oregon, California, but the Atlanta Blade Show is the show. It still is today in regards to knife shows. So
when you have this master rating now, are you now on a board or something that selects the next masters, or is that kind of thing, or how does that work?
I could be, like, I'm so busy with what we're doing today that I'm not even going to the Blade Show, frankly, but I've tested guys in my shop. So like when you do the performance test where you chop the rope and the 2x4s, you have to do that under the eye of a master bladesmith, and he has to sign off on a sheet that you did the thing. And I've tested a bunch of guys in my shop, and then they go to the Blade Show. And then I've hosted a bunch of, we call them hammer-ins, or like a knife conference. I've hosted a lot of that kind of stuff and brought guys in, and we've taught new up-and-coming knife makers. And once our new facility's done, I want to do more of that again. It's been a few years since I've done that. But
no, that's super cool. We have a local, and he's a career SEAL. He's got a shop called Valhalla's Forge in Virginia Beach. Mm-hmm. And he, his specialty was in breaching, and he could do some really incredible stuff with explosive things like that. But he's a master metal shop guy. Mm-hmm. And he just hosted last week a basic knife making course, and a bunch of the spouses and stuff were there. And the feedback I got on it was incredible. Now, I mean, he's not at your level, but it was a really cool thing for people to go and do the hands-on thing in his shop. So I think that'd be something that people would be attracted to, especially if you're there. So
yeah, no, for sure. I've taught at colleges, I've taught at hammer-ins in different places. It's a great thing to do. And spinning this forward a little bit, the year I kind of started MKC and we got going, went that whole first half of that year without taking a paycheck, and then in August, we actually flew in about 18 or 20 veterans, and we taught them how to forge knives for a weekend. And, I told those guys when they came in, like, for most of you, this will just be a fun weekend in Montana. It'll be a good experience. You'll go home. But I guarantee you there's going to be one or two of you that this, like, resonates with big time. Guys that are maybe struggling as they get out or whatever with some of the issues that we see veterans have. Let's say you come home from your day job, it's 5 o'clock. You got 5 more hours before you're going to bed, and you can sit around and watch TV and drink or kill time playing video games or whatever, or you could drag a forge out of your garage onto the apron in front of your garage and pick up a railroad, track piece of iron or whatever to use as an anvil and start your forge and just beat on steel for 2 or 3 hours. And I can guarantee you, if you do that, you won't think about anything but that piece of steel. It's so therapeutic. And for guys who are a little creative or like to do stuff with their hands, something just trips in their mind. And sure enough, a couple of those guys carried on with that and say it was life-changing for them because I said, I'm not trying to make you all necessarily professional knife makers. Like there's definitely better careers out there for making money. But I said, whether you want to make a knife, if you want to shoe a horse, if you want to make hooks for your wife's kitchen, ornamental ironwork, there's something about heating up a piece of steel to 2,500 degrees and hitting it with a hammer. It's physical, it's artistic, it's creative. It's, you kind of be industrious with your skills and whatnot. So, in regards to like the knife making, the basic classes, a lot of these guys, you find you just have to be singularly focused. And a lot of times it closes out all those other distractions that you might be having at the moment, whether it's issues with your family or work or, like I say, PTSD stuff. So it's a cool craft for sure.
We're actually working with a very, very small husband-wife company. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called War Paint Knives. Mark Carrion, he is a SEAL that got out medically, and knife making is what is getting him through life right now. And it's a very small business. They make some really cool little knives, but because of his involvement in the community and his therapy and stuff like that, we're actually hugely endorsing them because we want him to, come out of his funk and get out there. But the knives he's making are gorgeous. And it's exactly what you're saying. He basically took something and is turning it into positive energy.
Right.
We'll see where it goes, but it's kind of fun because as you explain that, now I understand what he's doing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, there's a lot of veterans in the knife community, frankly. And a lot of times it even turns into other art forms beyond just making knives. I mean, like I say, the ornamental like ironwork for like blacksmithing, making, coffee tables and stuff like that. All kinds, gates and railings for stairs. And again, it's something that just, I think especially for men, it just does something to their psyche that's, it gets those creative juices flowing. And again, it's really hard work. It's physical, it's dirty, it's hard, but it's, and you never feel like, no matter how good of a knife maker you become, there's always more you want to learn. So it's kind of an endless path.
So talk about MKC.
Yeah. So I mean, I made knives for a while as a full-time maker after I graduated high school, got married. The housing market crash of 2008-9 started making me realize like making one knife at a time was a really hard way to make a living. And I'd always wanted to start this company called Montana Knife Company from the time I was like 19 years old. We actually registered the name Montana Knife Company when I was 19. But I didn't have the money. I didn't know how to make production knives and all that. And so when that market crashed, I actually quit making knives full time because I was realizing I'm never gonna be able to start this company because I'm knife to knife, paycheck to paycheck. And I got a job operating backhoe for the power company, and then I got an apprenticeship and became a journeyman lineman working on the power lines. I did that for about 10 years, and towards the end of it, 11 years ago this year, I was divorced, and then my house burnt down. And so I was living in a camper, broke as hell, with 4 kids, and trying to rebuild my house that year. And that fall, I met my new wife, my now wife, Jessica, and I was telling her this idea of this Montana Knife Company. And she was like, well, you should do that. Like, get to your shop and do it. And so after work and before work, I started cutting some prototypes and doing that stuff in 2019. And in 2020, COVID, I decided to like go after it. And I met my business partner now. I just hired him to do some content for me in the spring. He came down and shot some photos, and he's like, well, I can build you a website. And we're deep into COVID. This is April of 2020. So he builds me a website. I launched that in July. I went to Total Archery Challenge and just introduced myself and said, hey, I'm starting this company. I knew nobody in the industry. And I realized how good Brandon was at like the marketing stuff. So I offered him partnership in the company in September. It was kind of a partnership of nothing really at that point. And I was still a lineman. And so we made some knives and dropped them, and then I'd make some more, and it was like going kind of well. And finally, by the end of 2020, my wife kept telling me, like, you got to quit your job. I'm like, man, I'm making $100,000 a year as a lineman, and I got benefits, and this whole knife thing is like completely unproven. But I needed the last day of the year off in 2020. I was out of vacation. I had to go meet Thomas Rhett, the country music singer, and my boss wouldn't give it to me. And I'm like, dude, I get 4 weeks vacation the next day. It starts over, and it's corporate. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, all right, well, then I quit. And so I quit my job December 30th. And so January 1st of 2021 was really when, like, it's like, oh shit, we burned the boats. This is it. And we didn't take a paycheck that whole first half of that year. And man, we just went after it. And I started hiring a couple people that spring. And shit, that year our goal was like 100,000 in sales, and we did like 1.9 million that year.
Yeah, I honestly did not realize it didn't take off until then, because you're exploding right now, which we'll get to. But so this trajectory from then till now has been kind of insane, right? It
has, like totally insane. And I was doing this in my 2-car garage when I was still a lineman. Like during that summer of COVID, my little girl, who was 14 at the time, was helping me grind knife handles during the day. My wife was helping assemble knives. My little kids were like 10, 11 years old, were helping assemble knives. They were bead blasting for me. I was paying them to help me out a little bit. And they were it was my family and me. And it was crazy, man. Honestly, looking back at it. But we didn't borrow any money. I already quit my job and felt like I was putting my family kind of at risk. So I refused to borrow money. So the whole idea was like, I'm just going to make 200 knives, which was as many as I could afford. In fact, my wife's dad had passed away that year, and she inherited about 20 grand. And she said, take that 20 grand and buy steel. And so I bought steel and used it to make those first knives. And it took about a year, and I actually paid her that money back so she could go buy a horse. Her dad was a big horse guy, and
that's awesome.
Sort of like that. But that was our seed money. And we sold 200 knives, and then I would cut more, and I'd made 200, and then I'm like, shit, I think we might be able to make like 400 knives. And so we'd make that, and we just kept putting every dollar back in for like a year and a half, and before we really started paying ourselves at all. And Brandon had quit his job, I quit mine, and then from there we just started growing. And the whole idea of starting this company was I was looking around at the knives available in stores, and I just saw more and more things being outsourced to China, shittier and shittier knives available for sale in the stores. Like I'd go pick them up, and I'd be like, you know, at that time I was really wanting to start a hunting knife company. Now we're expanding into tactical, but the ideas between the two spaces are the same. Like you're going out somewhere on a backcountry hunt or a deployment or whatever, and you need something you can count on. And also, I want something that somebody's proud to pass down.
Exactly.
Like I saw replaceable blades becoming a thing, and you know, they might have their spot in the industry, but like, are you going to pass down a replaceable blade knife to your grandson someday that you used on an elk hunt in Alaska or a deployment in Afghanistan? Like that, you know, that's stamped China on it. You know, I was like, we can make knives here in America. And I really felt like the American public there was enough people that would support us. Our knives aren't going to be the cheapest. If you want a $39.99 knife, like go buy it at Walmart. Like we're going to be $200-$300. It's not cheap, but it's also, it's attainable for about anyone if they want it to be.
Yeah. So I'm a knife guy, and I'm going to throw out what I started with. Now I went in the service in '82, and our culture was big in the knives. And my first knife that I used to carry was a big pig stick, but a Randall number 14.
Yeah.
I went back between my Randall 1 and 14. I also had a Jimmy Lyle.
Yeah.
Those were my favorite blades, and I still have them.
Those are legends.
And those knives will be handed down, just like you said.
Yep.
And I can remember when I got my Randall 14, you couldn't get them. There was a line to get them, just like your knives today.
Yep.
So it's kind of...
You had to go to the blade show and beat everyone else to Bo Randall's table or Jimmy Lyle's table and buy one in the first half hour of the show.
Yes, exactly. And the one thing that was cool is us being community guys, is we had you don't have to go to the show. You get to the front of the line because we know who you guys are.
As it should be.
And we would get them. And, people would see that knife and they'd be like, well, where'd you get that? And they'd be like, I can't get one.
Yeah.
Kind of like what's going on with you today.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's the thing is there's, some real American people made those knives, and they made those knives to be the absolute best tools they could be. And there's heart and soul behind that knife. And then I've sharpened thousands of knives for people over my life as a knife maker. And people come into my shop, and I don't care what brand it is or what knife it is. It always matters to people who carried it. And they'll walk in and they'll be like, hey, this is my grandfather's K-bar, or my grandpa carried this pocket knife in Vietnam, or this tactical knife or whatever it is, or he was a bush pilot in Alaska, and this was my grandmother's chef set. And, or, hey, this pocket knife here, the tips broke off of it. Could you fix it up? And I just want to have it on my mantle. And you never throw away knives. Even the tips broke off or something, a guy will just set it in his safe or put it off to the side. Like something, it's like a gun. I don't care how shitty the gun is. Like, you don't throw them away. Like, you might give it to someone or pass it down or find a kid, but it doesn't matter what it is. Like, you don't throw away knives and guns. And so this idea that we started throwing away, like with these replaceable knives, it's like when you're 35 years old and you're on a hunt in British Columbia, or you're 28 years old and you're on a deployment somewhere, you're not thinking at that moment about who you're going to pass it down to someday. You're just doing your thing, whatever that is. But someday somebody's going to be like, God, my grandpa back in 2005 was in Iraq, and he was a part of the GWAT, and this was the knife that he carried. Like, you're not going to have his gun. You're going to have very little. You might have a uniform or something, maybe. There's a lot of family members, and a lot of times people come to me and they're like, literally the only thing I got from my grandfather's estate was this 22 and this knife. It's a treasure. It is a treasure, and you'll never let that go.
Yeah. And if you don't see it that way, you're probably not our kind of guy.
Yeah, so. And you just, a lot of times when you're young, you're just not looking at things for down the road, and you're just doing your thing. But it's, and I feel like when we make a knife, I always imagine some kid somewhere off on the other side of the globe, like with our tactical knives right now, if that kid pulls that knife out and he's missing home and he takes it out and he starts whittling on something, or he's opening a, MRE or whatever he's doing with it, and he looks at that knife and it says made in USA, Montana Knife Company, that kid can know there's 85 employees in Montana that like spent time on that knife and want that guy to come home safe. They're proud of their country. Like, it shouldn't say China on it. We're just we're very patriotic. We really do appreciate. The only country in the world that Montana Knife Company is possible is here. I was living in a camper, broke as hell, couldn't afford to buy a decent vehicle 10 years ago with 4 kids. It was like a sad country song. And today I'm here doing this podcast with 85 employees and like this bright ass future ahead of us. That only happens in the U.S.
That's right. And it is a bright future. I just saw the pictures on Instagram of your new building.
Yeah.
So obviously if you're upscaling, there's a reason, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how the hell they're doing that in that snow, by the way, but they're doing it.
They're tough. So yeah. There's still some tough blue collar workers in this country.
That's right. So you've got the knife companies up and booming, and you guys are, moving in the right direction. At what point in, up to now, at what point did you say to yourself, all right, we've achieved what I never thought I would. Now here's the new trajectory.
We had to get out of that 2-car garage, but I couldn't afford to buy land anywhere else. So we built a building in my horse pasture. So all like 70 of my employees still report to work at my house today. And you alluded to it. We're building a new facility now about 15 miles away. But once we got into that building, I was able to hire some more people, and I felt like it's not like we haven't fully taken over Hunt, but we're very solid in that footing. I started seeing a lot of our guys cross over. They're hunters, but they're also either active duty or they're veterans. And I've also seen the same thing with knives as a part of your gear in the tactical community. And we are very patriotic. I'm not a veteran. I've hired a few, but I wanted to start providing that quality. I think the quality of the backcountry hunter and the guy in deployment is the same. And so I've started working with, I've asked a ton of guys. One thing I'll tell you, you ask 10 Army Rangers what the best knife is, or 10 SEALs, or
10 different answers. You know that.
Yeah. And some of them are some really dumb answers.
Yeah.
But I'll say I've learned a ton, and what I've been going through and asking, because I'm not going to act like I'm that guy. So, but I know how to make a quality blade. And so we've started coming out with some tactical knives very specific for what, there's everything from the guy that just wants something kind of utilitarian, cut some rope here and there and whatnot, to the guy that wants to carry it in case he actually gets in a hand-to-hand situation. And then there's everything in between. Like, we're coming out with a sear knife here later this spring. We've got I'm a smaller knife guy. Like, when I'm hunting, I like less weight, less bulk. I know our guys that are deploying have all kinds of shit strapped to them everywhere. So if it was me, I'd want a smaller blade on me that's not completely in the way, but a lot of times it's on how you carry it and is it accessible.
Now, we were just having this conversation, just myself, and we were talking about blades. And like myself, I got it. I've got a couple big blades, but my average everyday blade needs 4 inches as long as it needs to be.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
Yeah. So we're trying to kind of make some knives for that community. And I really want to show that community. We really are trying to listen to them and figure out what is it that these guys need. And the battle space is also changing a lot. I mean, we've seen that, from, the GWAT and all that stuff. Now we're seeing guys freaking World War I trench fighting in Ukraine. Like, it's bonkers. But, so I'm always asking guys what they see that's coming next and what's needed. And so we just want to keep expanding that line and listening to that community. Been working a lot with like Brian Morgan, that's running, sniper training, long range shooting stuff in Idaho. We donate knives to every one of his classes, and he gives the knife out to every single top shooter at every one of his classes. And I've gone there and just hung out there and trying to get to know the guys and really honestly just asking them what they need.
Yeah, so just from the community side of the house, guns, knives. Guns I'll start with. Like, there's a lot of guys that couldn't even tell you how the gun functions, but are damn good with it. They're not into the gun porn, but they are very good with it. They know how to operate it. They don't really care about the mechanics. You get a lot of that with knives too. I'm a knife guy, so I care about it. For me, I've always believed in 2 knives, a work knife and a work knife, if you know what I mean.
I'd agree with that.
And then, and the work knife I treat pretty raw. I mean, it's a freaking tool, and the other knife is made for something else. But I think if you don't truly understand the whole quality of the knife and everything, you may never get it. But I will tell you this, every single community guy that when you put a really good blade in front of them, they recognize it and they know it. They just may have never had the right one in front of them. And there are so many blades out there. I mean, that's why, and I'll tell you how I got to know you was from Aaron. I know you've done a knife with Aaron. It's, I believe, the Jackstone.
Yeah.
And it's a gorgeous knife. And I checked it out and I looked at it and I'm like, okay, this is a quality knife. And I was like, I want to go talk to Josh. I want to meet Josh. And then Aaron showed me some of the knives that you guys have made. And I'm like, this is good stuff as a knife guy. And I'm like, is he getting into tactical knives? And as I'm saying that, I go look on your website. And I'm like, he already is.
Yeah.
He's already started there. So when did you decide to take that leap?
Yeah, last year we kind of pushed off into that a little bit slowly. We came out with a few models. One of the coolest ones, we've got, the Devil's Brigade knife. The V42,
like
that old school.
Dagger.
Yeah, the dagger.
Yeah.
The Devil's Brigade was actually, that's really where Special Forces was born. And it was out of Fort Harrison in Helena, Montana, with a group of guys out of Canada. And that's kind of how the Devil's Brigade came along. I'm like, man, what a cool piece of history in the tactical, in the military space. And it ties right to Montana. Now, that V42 knife, it's a bit long. It's a bit crazy. Like, I don't think most guys these days would want to carry something that long. So we redid that knife. We called it our V24. It was V42 Victory for 1942. Well, we did it last year, so we called it the V24, but we shortened it up and we made some modifications to where I think this is a dagger that you could legit carry and not have it be in the way, but it would do the job if it needed to do it. And then we have a couple more utilitarian, Like our war goat's more of a ring style knife. Our battle goat that's kind of similar but no ring on it. Really easy to pull out. I see a lot of cops carrying that too. And we have a task force knife that's kind of more just that heavy use, everyday knife. But yeah, we're trying to kind of expand. Like I say, we're doing the sear knife this year. We're doing another knife that's wrapped in paracord that's just kind of light. And frankly, if you need some extra cordage or something, you could unwrap that handle and use it. And I agree with the two knives. Like even in a hunting space, like Aaron is a guy that's known for going back for 10 days on a, high altitude mule deer hunt. Like a super light little knife for caping and little small things, and then maybe a little bit heavier duty knife that's in your pack for skinning or, chopping wood in camp. And it's interesting in the knife space. I don't know if you tell me if it's been this way in the military, but in the hunting space, I see hunters spend hundreds of dollars on base layers, their rain gear, their mid layer, their coat. Then they go into a $400 pack, long range glass. They'll build a $10,000 long range rifle, even though they've never shot over 100 yards, and the highest end boots, like all the things, optics, Swaro binos, and all the shit, spotting scopes, and then they'll buy a $39 knife. And I'm like, okay, the only two things you really need to go hunt is a gun and a knife. You shoot something and you break it down. And I'm like, it should be a part of your gear that you spend just as much time thinking about, like, hey, I need a quality blade. Same thing if you're deployed, like, are you going to have to go hand to hand and kill someone with a knife? Probably not, right? But again, if we're planning always worst case scenarios, you should be thinking about that. We just saw a video from a dude in Ukraine, get put down by a Russian in a knife fight, like legitimately. So a guy should be thinking about that, or maybe you end up, separated from your unit for a while and you do have to use some of your sear skills. Do you have a knife blade that's capable of doing that?
Well, I'll back up there for a minute because, so we're actually starting this Born Primitive Academy. And one of the things we've realized is how many people that are out there that can't even start a fire.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, when you bring that point up. So one thing, marketing is very powerful. So if these optics and gun manufacturers and even our brand with apparel, if we're hitting the marketing, you feel like you can't, you will not survive the hunt. You will not survive without this. I'm with you. I think the knife is like the tool that can change the day, especially on an Aaron Snyder type situation where you're out in a deep backpack 6-7 days. And if you don't have the ability to have a knife that's both a tool, skin an animal, be a work knife, make a fire, all these things you need, you're going to be in a bind really quick. And the military is the same way. Now, a lot of people just don't know what they don't know, and they get issued. I can tell you that I have never, 30 years active duty service, I was never once issued a knife that I carried. They just were always so, you look at something like a K-bar. Is it a very good traditional knife? Yes. It is a good knife. It's really not a good knife. I can remember, I'll tell you how far back this was, is when I first came in as an Army Ranger, you could not jump a knife that was in a leather sheath. And all our knives were leather because it would go through possibly.
Yep.
And you know what we all carried? Glock made a knife. And you know why we carried that Glock knife? Because it came in a hardened plastic sheath and it was legal to jump. So we were jumping a knife that was average at best, but we were allowed to jump it, and that's why we carried it. So it's one of those, the total system. So like if you're building a tactical knife and it is a leather sheath, you're probably going to be removed from some of the community because now in a helicopter impact, in a jump scenario or something like that, it's not going to be safe approved.
Yep.
So,
and that's why like our knives come with Kydex sheaths, and I do a big part of it is carrying it. And again, I don't care if you're a hunter or if you're a ranger, I think you should carry your knife in a place that's accessible. Like in a hunting situation, like is a mountain lion going to jump on your back? Probably not. But if it does, you might literally have to go to your knife, right? And same thing with a dude who's going door to door in Afghanistan. Like you come around a corner, the next thing you know, a guy's on top of you. You might have to go to your knife.
Yeah, I mean, I won't say every guy, but most guys somewhere on their plate carrier up front have a fighting knife.
Have something.
Have something quickly accessible.
But then again, that has to be a good enough sheath that where when you do jump or if you've done something that's fairly physical, you don't look down and the thing's gone.
Right.
And it fell out of the sheath. That's the other thing. When I would go to stores and look at hunting knives, I'd say, hey, let me see the sheath. And it was always an afterthought. It wasn't a part of the whole thought of the whole package. It was an afterthought.
Yeah. No, I think for the tactical military community, if you're doing Kydex with a MOLLE attachment, you're in the game.
Right.
Because it'll get on any, I mean, almost all the gear now is designed where if you have a MOLLE attachment, you're on. And we do, and you'll see it in some of our advertising, we have some knives that we're wearing on a gun belt because we're not wearing plates and stuff like that. And it's just because we want a knife with us, but that's not where I'd ever carry a blade.
Well, that's why we also sell extra sheaths for these knives, because I'll see guys buy a couple extra sheaths and they might, hell, I see guys zip tie sheaths to stuff, but they might say, hey, depending on, like, is this an over the beach situation, or are we jumping, or are we walking in? And so, like, depend on your gear, you might have a sheath attached to a piece of gear that you don't use except for once in a while. And so I do see guys buying multiple sheaths. So they don't have to unstrap something and take it all apart or whatever.
That's real smart, actually. There.
Yeah.
So what other blades do you have in the tactical environment? What do you have coming?
Yeah. So we got that sear knife coming in the tactical space. We really right now just have those 4 knives. Those 2 smaller ones are task force knives, kind of in the middle, and then the dagger. And then we're developing right now, but it's probably going to be another year before it's out. But we're working with a couple guys on a real, like, legit potential fighting knife. I'm talking to a couple of the GBRS guys about getting some advice on a couple knives they might like to see. I'm also talking a lot to cops and just trying to find out what our first responders are wanting to see. We're talking about making like a jump master knife. And a lot of that's, again, on where is it carried? How's it carried? Is it on their leg? And I'm talking to different guys that have kind of done some of that work.
So we have a huge law enforcement audience. Born Primitive Tactical, it's something we're very engaged in. If you wanted to get some input from that community, how would they do it? Through your customer service? What would be the best way we could pass to them?
I mean, honestly, my Instagram, my personal one, just my Josh Smith Knives, I get guys that will just DM me some of that stuff, and I'll actually reach out to guys specifically, even when I see their. Maybe it's like through your page. I see you doing something with somebody, and I'll reach out and say, hey, would you mind give me your opinion on this or that? So that's a good way to do it. They can sure email stuff in, but my Instagram is a really good place for that.
Yeah, I use it the same way.
Yeah. But and then we're also developing a folding knife to come out next year. So we're going to be getting into the pocket knives. That's like the most asked about thing that we possibly have. And I think most guys that probably would deploy would have a fixed blade of some kind and probably a folding knife of some kind.
That's exactly what I do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you're nailing everything about as far as where fit, function, and all that kind of stuff is. So what on average, how many knives a year are you guys making right now?
Last year was like close to 100,000.
And here's the fun part. So when you do a drop on typically, how long do they last before they're gone?
Man, that's been crazy. I mean, we did a drop on Thursday night and it was 4 minutes. It's been
4 minutes
between a minute and like 10 minutes. It's kind of insane. We're trying to get more knives in stock where people can come and just buy something. But when we release something new, it's crazy. Every Thursday night at 7:00 Mountain Time, we have a drop. And I think people think that we're not actually producing. Like, people are like, would you make 6? It's like, well, we made 100,000 knives last year. Like, do the math. We're making a lot of knives every week. But I also refuse to try to make more knives just to meet demand and then let our quality slide. People have to understand there's no big investors in this company. It's still me and Brandon. We're still hiring people. We're training. We're scaling. It's in my backyard. Like, when we move into this next building at the end of this year, we'll be able to hire more, bring more processes in-house. But I just kind of refuse to try to. I'm not going to outsource. I'm not going to go to China. It has been a real struggle at times, like when we're looking at making our folding knife and making like the pocket clip for a folding knife or the screws. I mean, I just went and bought a Swiss screw machine, freaking $700,000, $600,000 machine to make our own screws because most of the best dances were overseas. Like, well, I'm not fucking doing that. So,
When will you guys be in the new building? How long will it take?
I'm hoping December of this year.
Will the new building in any way, shape, or form like will we be able to do more production? Is that the idea?
That's the idea. I mean, we're in a 10,000 square foot building now, and this building's 50,000 square feet.
A huge leap.
Yeah, huge leap. So that's going to bring in more production in house. We're truly trying to show that the American dream is possible. Like, you start in your garage and you just step it along the way. We could have taken investment to try to go faster. We could have done other things, but like, we're just trying to grow this really solid. And you know, the one thing that I think makes us different is most of these big production knife companies out there don't have an actual knife maker as the CEO. Like, I'm involved in all the design, the discussions like we're having here about, you know, like, hey, I'm going to talk to this guy who's a cop in, you know, LA, and what works for you and what doesn't. I go to the shows, I hear what people come to our booth say. I can go out and I can make whatever I need to make. I can test things. So most of the big owners of really, really major knife brands can't. You know, a really great knife brand that especially the steel community is really familiar with is like Dan Winkler, you know, Winkler Knives. I've known Dan since I was 15 years old doing knife shows next to Dan and Karen, and they're phenomenal humans, and they've done a lot. I remember Dan back in probably the year 1999, and he was like, oh, I'm starting to make some knives for some seals, and this is kind of cool. We're playing with different ideas, and he became really popular in that space. And, you know, his Seox and some of that stuff, Jack Carr always talks about him, but you know, there's a few people out there that make some great knives.
No, he's definitely a cult following in the team community. Yeah. My last 3 years on active duty, I was a liaison there, and all the new guys get a Winkler when they get to their unit. And then a program I ran where we would go into cities, the lead cop would usually give him a Winkler and stuff. So, but yeah, great blade. It's you know, and again, just kind of like what you're doing too is. Never coming off the quality to just increase production, which is, I think, the answer.
Yeah.
So,
and Dan's an example of that. Like, he's hired people, he's got guys working for him, but Dan is a knife maker. He's a master bladesmith. He knows what he's doing, you know, and he hasn't come off of that quality.
So, who else out there in the knife making community is either influence you, or you look at what they're doing, you're like, hey, that's a pretty cool knife, like. Who else would you say is out there that when you look at them, you're like, I like what they're doing?
Yeah, I tend to follow, you know, more of the custom guys, you know, and I have guys that were mentors of mine, Harvey Dean, Tim Hancock, who passed away, but Rick Dunkerley, the guy that taught me to make knives, is still just making unbelievable knives. And then there's some young guys out there, Will Stelter, you know, and then there's guys that are doing things that are different than mine that are cool. Lucas with Grizzly Forge, he actually used to work here at Black Rifle. You know, his shop used to be here. There's a lot of cool knife makers out there. And that's a thing, like, I'm not real, I was raised by knife makers, basically. So granted, like, Dan Winkler is quote unquote competition, right? Well, Dan, we're doing a fundraiser for the California fires and the North Carolina floods. And Dan calls me a couple weeks ago and was like, hey, I'd like to donate a couple knives to that. Like, but if you don't want to take them because, like, it's another knife company, like, I totally get it. And I'm like, dude, send them. And so we just sent out a big email to 1 million people yesterday talking about Winkler's knives. And so I don't look at these other knife companies as competition. I think generally men buy lots of knives and guns. Like, I don't know anybody that has one gun that doesn't have probably 3 different brands of guns.
Right. There's plenty to go around.
There's plenty to go around. And
right.
It's like, if you buy Winkler's knives, that's awesome. I hope you buy one of ours too, and vice versa, you know? So it's a cool community. It's a very cool community.
So question I've got to ask. So Aaron works for us now and we love it. And Aaron is like my brother from another mother. Tell me about the process of you two coming up with the Jackstone and making that, because it's a pretty cool knife.
It is. It's different. I was talking to Aaron. Started to be honest, I came into this space during COVID of 2020, and I was just a fan of the space. I was a hunter from Montana. You know, I thought Aaron Snyder was freaking cool. Listened to his podcasts all the time when I was starting this company, and so I've gotten fortunate to become actual friends with a lot of these different people. But much like with what we're doing with the tactical stuff, in the hunt side, I want really credible people attached to us. So when I look around the community, like who to me has the most credibility in the hunt space, it's not who's killing the biggest deer. A lot of that's bullshit. Who's the most credible, like hardcore hunter? And like Aaron Snyder's top of the list. I mean, that dude's going out and doing legit stuff, you know, public land, 10, 12,000 feet in elevation, try and sit on one deer for a week. He's a psychopath.
Yeah, he's a freaking animal.
Yeah, he is. And so I'm like, that's the guy I want associated with us. Like, because people would listen to his gear review stuff and like what Aaron says, like he isn't going to BS you. And if it's not the, you know, at that time it was Kifaru. If it's not Kifaru's brand, like, hey, Sitka does great over here, or this company does great over here, this one puffy that I like, or this pair of socks. And so reached out to him, became friends over a couple years a little bit. And I'm like, hey, I want to do a knife with you. And so when I do this kind of stuff, I'm like, what is there a knife you've used in the past, a style, something? And he sends me this drawing on a napkin and a couple photos, and he's like, I want to kind of do this old school Canadian belt knife, and I'd never seen it before. And so we made some changes to some things that he wanted to see, and then we were talking about names, and like naming a product a lot of times is a big deal. And he's kicking out a few names I wasn't really too much of a fan of, like, somebody's not even gonna know how to spell that. And then he goes, I hunt in this mountain range called the Jackstones, and I was like, done. That's the name. That's a great name, the Jackstone.
Perfect.
Yeah, and he sends me photos of a dead goat that he had from the year before in the Jackstone range in Canada, and I was like, that's it. That's
Done deal. Here we are.
But I'll make some prototypes, and we'll kind of be going back and forth and trying to make it to where when we get something done, that person's really proud to put their name on it. And that knife's been crazy popular.
It's crazy popular. Every time it drops, it's gone.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been talking to your folks about trying to do something with that too. And it's just literally that knife is insane.
Yeah,
so,
it really is.
So good choice on that.
Yeah.
And I honestly think, so I did not know the story of the name until just now.
Yeah.
I thought there was no clue what it was about, but that's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's a spot that nobody probably knows where or how to get to, but that's a mountain range in Canada. And you know, and that knife has really proven to be a great design because it's not just about Aaron. Like when people see that, people who have no idea who Aaron is, and they're just like, that's a cool knife. That's different. Like I want that. And then obviously there's a lot of people that know who Aaron is and that want to get it because of Aaron. So
yeah, well, I think on both fronts there, that if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I got to have a Montana knife, start there. It is. I'm a knife guy. I'm exactly what he's describing. I've got a safe full of knives, some handed down to me that are going to be handed down. And as soon as I saw the Jackson, I'm like, these guys did it. So kind of cool. So I mean, obviously through Instagram and stuff like that, but for somebody that's watching this is like, man, I really want one of the knives. What's the best way to follow? Explain the whole cycle of your drops and all that, because folks, you're not going to go to the website and put an order in and have a knife come.
Yeah, I mean, and I know people get frustrated by it, and I'm like, hey, I understand, I appreciate you, just keep trying. But the best way really is to sign up for our email list on our Montana Knife Company website. And I know you get emails from us, and a lot of times people are tired of getting emails. But I will say our emails are pretty cool because there's other stuff within those. We do a lot of educational stuff. We've started shooting a series with John Barklow. And John Barklow was the guy that set up all the cold weather training stuff for the SEALs up in Kodiak, Alaska. Like he's legit as it gets when it comes. Him and Snyder are good buddies. Like I look at John as the other Snyder as far as like when he says something about a piece of information, if it's cold weather camping or whatever, like follow what that guy says. We started shooting series with John. And so there's a lot of other informational stuff in our emails, but on our emails, we will tell you when a knife's coming out. You know, hey, it's on a Thursday night or a Saturday. And the best thing is try to be in there like a couple minutes before it drops and then be fast. Now, I understand people don't like playing, they call it a game or whatever. It's as if a lot of times I'm like, it's not like I don't want your money. Like, yes, we want you to be able to buy a knife. I'm not trying to play games here, but it is the most fair way. It's like, here, 7 o'clock, you know when it is, get one. We do like for the military guys, the GovX, we do the GovX discount stuff. I think that's like 30%. I really do want as many of our American soldiers as possible to have our knives. Like,
yeah, so that's for everybody. That is why I asked Josh to come on this podcast. Is the knives are a legend in the hunting community. I wanted to get them to our audience, which is primarily military, tactical, law enforcement, first responders. So, I mean, pass this podcast on to people, pass the word on about Montana Knife. Just go look at their Instagram and their website. It's self-explanatory. And I'm telling you, as a knife guy, it's worth the wait. It's worth sitting there and clicking on when it's the right time. There's things that you buy that are treasures for life. These are those knives. I mean, you want to go to a department store, whatever you want to call it, Cabela's, and pick up a knife off the rack. That's fine. But that knife off the rack is exactly that. This is a treasure. So, Josh, I appreciate having you on. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, I appreciate that. And the last thing I will say, we stand by our knives for life. So like we offer free sharpening for life. So whether it's after hunting season or a successful hunt or a deployment or just whatever, our chef's knives in the kitchen, they start to get dull. Every knife's going to get dull. I'm not saying our knives won't get dull. They're going to get dull. And if you struggle to sharpen them, send them to us and we sharpen them and send them back the next day for free.
That's awesome.
And so we won't keep them for more than 24 hours. It's a tool, so I don't want people to be without their tools, whether it's in the kitchen, or in the outdoor world. So that part of it, when you buy something from our website, we know who you are and we will help support you. We'll take care of that. So please do, send those blades in. I would much rather someone send it to us and us have to sharpen it than someone go, oh, this is dull, and they grab something else that's maybe more inferior and they put that on their kit or in their hunting pack and let us help take care of you. That's part of why you pay $200-300 for a knife versus $69. Like, we're going to sharpen that thing for as many years as you want us to. And I didn't build this company up to sell it and get rid of it. We're going to be I've made knives since I was 11. I'm not trying to off this company anytime soon. I hope my kids run it someday. So we're going to be around to help take care of our customers. So no, I really appreciate it, man. I think we're similar to Born Primitive, where it's like you start it in a garage.
Your story is amazingly like your story and Bear and Mallory starting the brand. They started in a garage. They had to make a very hard financial decision, him leaving the active duty Navy and walking away from all those protections to jump both feet into a brand, and then having some lean years. And guess what? The sizes of our company are about the same. We're starting a new building. You're starting a new building. So it's when you were telling the story, I'm like, man, does this parallel?
Yeah.
And you want to know what? I think what Bear and Mallory did, what you've done, it is the American dream, right? And you guys stand by what you're doing. And the cool thing is we're in the apparel business and it's much different. We're not going to be passing apparel on to anybody. We know that.
Sure.
But I do know that if Aaron Snyder will wear our stuff on an 8-day hunt out in the Outback and comes back and wants to be not just repping our brand, but now employed by our brand, I think we're going after the same level of craftsmanship.
Yeah, and it's similar. Our customers have very similar ideals about our nation. We're not embarrassed of our nation. We're actually proud of our country. And when you put a shirt on every day, when you put that shirt on, you are a walking advertisement. You're a billboard. So when you put on a Born Primitive shirt, that means something. That says something. If you put on a Nike t-shirt, that also says something.
That's right.
So what is it about that company that you're trying to represent? You are walking advertisement. If you buy an MKC hat, Born Primitive hat, whatever, and so even if it's not something that's going to be passed down, and I think your brand is very similar when they see someone in an airport and they're like, hey, that's that Born Primitive company or that's that knife company. It's a lot like Black Rifle some years ago. I remember I was one of the first guys wearing Black Rifle stuff around the Missoula area, and people would stop and be like, dude, I know that company. That's cool. And like, we don't know each other, but I bet we could be friends because it's
an ethos.
It is.
It's an ethos. And I'll tell you that the only reason I'm even out here with my position, because this is Aaron's show, The Outdoor, is to meet collaborative brands that have the same ethos as us and grow together.
Yep.
That's why I came and talked to you and some other folks. I think that ethos is, so personally, and this is Bear's charter. They were in here doing some business with Black Rifle yesterday. We have something really cool coming for Veterans Day that we're going to do with this company. But I think that if you build a quality brand and you have the ethos of the flag, America, you know, we don't talk politics. We talk about what's good for the country, supporting our military, first responders. That is talking politics, right? And we just, that's our vision. That's what we're like.
Yeah.
So you said something about, I don't care if you buy a Montana Knife Company hat. Before I give you something, I just want to do something here.
All right.
I want to go official and put this on. But so something I want to do before you leave. So for me, I have a very creative mind, and sometimes it comes out of the weight room. Sometimes it comes from sitting all the way alone with my dog on the boat dock, having a glass of whiskey and a cigar. So what I want to do for a guy that has a really masterful mind, I'm going to promote that. So neither of us are big drinkers, folks. We've talked about this, but I'm going to bring him into my spirit world where every now and then a glass of whiskey really promotes some creative thinking. So this is a brand. This is Hooten & Young. If you don't know the story on this, Norm Hooten, Hoot from Task Force Ranger, Black Hawk Down. This is his 15-year stuff. I love Norm. I think this company is our ethos. And I've been giving, since I've started the podcast up, either a knife or a bottle of Hooten & Young to all my guests, and I could not see giving this gentleman a knife. I just didn't see how it would work. So I'm like, I'm going to get the best bottle of Hooten & Young that's made. And from me to you, from Hooten & Young, yes, sir. I hope that. And then one last thing. From my community, which is the tactical community, we do these. That is numbered, and thank you, sir.
Thank you. It's an honor. It really is an honor. I appreciate it.
Yeah, honor to have you here. And any final comments?
No, man, I appreciate you, and I know this is a heavy, veteran and active duty community podcast. I can't tell people how much I appreciate the service that you guys have done for our country, and it truly allows us to build the American dream, whether it's Bear's company, mine. I think we're an example that, you know, you see all these things that, like, the world's not fair, the country's not fair, you can't get ahead. But we live in a free country, and actually, thank God, it really feels like our country's headed back. The pendulum has swung in a big way, and it's heading in the right direction. And I appreciate everyone that gave us the opportunity to chase my dream.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you. I don't care if you flipped eggs in the Coast Guard or you were a D-Day. If you served, you served to me.
You raised your hand. I didn't. You guys raised your right hand. I still remember where I was on 9/11, driving a dump truck down the Blackfoot River Canyon. And man, everybody that serves, I really do. Really, it's an honor to be friends with so many of you guys. And again, it's created an environment where I can chase my dream, making knives for the hunting community and now the tactical community for a living. And it's very few countries, if any other countries, is that possible. So
no, and I'll tell you, right, just to add to that piece, what the military does for our freedom, our first responders does for our homeland, and one can't do the job with the other. So it's a two-pronged thing, and I believe in it. And
I was at the inauguration. I saw those first responders standing out. It was colder than hell on inauguration weekend in D.C. We were there, and they were standing on street corners for the what-if scenario that never came, freezing their asses off from daylight till dark. We took about, I think, 100 beanies and gave them out to a bunch of guys. We said thank you to everybody we walked by in an intersection.
That is awesome.
But yeah, man, our first responders they're the ones that keep our country
toughest job in America
safe
right now. They're under the scrutiny every day, and they just can't win, and they keep us safe. So.
Agreed.
All right, Josh, thank you. And for everybody listening, Montana Knife Company, huge fans, ethos of our company. Check them out, take a look at it. And for the tactical community, I'm telling you, there's something that we need. And if you buy one, it's one for life. So thanks for watching the Hot Wash. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Hot Wash by Born Primitive Tactical. Don't forget to like, subscribe, or follow us at Born Primitive Tactical. I'll see you next time.